Well, Chanel, thank you so much for joining us for the Formidable podcast. It's great to be here today.
Thank you. I'm so excited to talk with you.
Absolutely. Maybe explain to us a little bit what GYST is and Scrivner and kind of how these two organizations work.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Get Your Shit Together, or GYST for the beeping people, is a company organization I started about a dozen years ago. It was a, well, I guess you could say I found this, the work found me, which is a way that many people I've come to learn get into the business of or service of helping people through grief and loss and losing somebody. And when my late husband, Jose, had an accident and we spent a week in the ER and the ICU, and at the end of that week, I went from praying and saying, do everything possible to keep him alive, to realizing there were hundreds of things that I didn't know, or hundreds of things that would have taken maybe 5 seconds to figure out that I didn't and you can't do after. And after a week in the hospital and removing medical support, I realized that we kind of suck at dying in this country. And that there were a number of things that I could have done, our family could have done, and everybody can do to make a hard time just a little bit softer. And it was those moments, all of those cumulative moments in the hospital for that week. And then it was the days, months, years really of this administrative gulag that I learned, like Googling what is probate. Like nobody should do that late night Google after perhaps a few glasses of wine. It's very sad. I don't recommend it. So it was the process of going through losing somebody, becoming widowed and a solo parent to a young child and a stepdaughter that I realized that there were so many things we can do to help people make that transition or help people after death a little bit easier. And it was going through this after process, probate, that I realized what I wish I would have done and what we can do in advance, and still yet needing help and support after. So it's kind of now what do we do before to make maybe like a softer landing for people who are experiencing death or grief or loss? And then how can we be better as individuals and communities to help people find the services they need and have a little help navigating this crazy bureaucratic, awful process where you have to talk to hundreds of people just to figure out where your money is.
Well, I'm really sorry for your loss. I mean, that's a tragedy and certainly not something that you expected in your life at that moment. Do you find with GYST and Scrivner that you are working with people who are in those kind of crisis situations where they're unexpectedly dealing with something, or are these folks who are maybe trying to plan ahead now and get ahead of things?
Great question. So I started Get Your Shit Together because literally 24 hours into the accident in the ICU, there were all these questions coming from nurses or doctors, or where's your insurance card, or what's the social security number? Do you have long-term care insurance or disability insurance? And so I turned to a friend and said, literally, oh my God, I don't have my shit together at all. And then there was this moment, kind of like when in a movie, I don't know what it's called, like the camera zooms in and pans out at the same time, and it's like the ground falls out from underneath you. I realized that if this was happening to me, I mean, to be honest, a college-educated, legally married, native English speaker who's maybe like a recovering type A personality, extrovert, then what is happening to everybody else in every hospital and every ICU across the country? So it was because I realized I wasn't ready that I couldn't not stop thinking about needing to get my shit together and wanting to share that with other people. So it started off really as a project managing my grief would maybe be a way that somebody might describe it. And then also a way to get through it with having good days sometimes were like getting your kid to school on time and wearing a clean pair of pants. So I really wanted to move from the like pants days to the how do I crawl out of this hole 5 minutes at a time? How does everybody make themselves and their families just a little bit more prepared? So if or when life knocks you sideways, you don't have hundreds of questions flooding you. So maybe you can be in the room. Maybe you have more brain energy to think about what the doctors are saying. Maybe you have more energy to read a story to your kid or go out and garden. So this is really kind of like a what I wish I would have done. And so, I mean, I am not anyone who's been passionate about estate planning. My mission is not, I didn't wake up one morning and think, attorneys should probably make a lot more money. This is more
I'm not sure anybody's woken up saying that.
I would agree with that. Yeah, if I were a betting person. But it's really about what and how do we need to take care of our lives better and smarter for who we are, right? And that's an emergency plan. That's a credit card. That's getting a trust or a will. That's writing down one of your 100 online passwords so somebody knows where your stuff is. So after something happens, we can be hopefully thinking more about how lovely it was to have you in our lives and less so. Where did he put the Bitcoin password, for example?
Okay, so what you're talking about is you're helping people do some of those really practical things ahead of time so that they're not finding themselves in the same situation that you were in, where they're just scrambling at a time when they're also grieving or experiencing this incredible trauma.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's kind of a harm reduction model, and it's also really just something that hasn't been written into the spec of our lives very well. One could even call it kind of the missing link in the feminist curriculum that we've all kind of not really had. Like personal finance was something we realized, well, many people realized 10, 15 years ago that women in general didn't have the same education or information or experience that a lot of men did, not to make it gender binary. And so I've seen in the last handful of years a lot more energy going into personal finance and managing your money. And so when it comes to what is this life that you have and the details and the admin that's in it, it's also a really important, critical thing for us as individuals to make sure that our name is on the title of our house, that we know where our money is. We know whether we're the beneficiary or not. And so when it comes to navigating a hard time, we're all going to have them at some point, but making sure that after something happens or while something is happening, you're not wondering if your name's on the house or how you're going to afford to live and figure out this new life of yours. So getting your shit together is a much easier, more inviting in a way to describe estate planning or legacy planning. So if and when something happens, we have a bigger lifeboat or perhaps a better bridge to take us from our old life to the new one.
And my understanding, Michelle, is you are kind of taking people through this like 5 minutes at a time. This is not sit down for the next week and this is all you're going to do and you're going to figure this out. It's more like, I don't know, pieces that are easy to digest a little bit at a time, just to, as you say, get your shit together. But it shouldn't feel overwhelming. Is that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the big issues when it comes to this estate planning stuff is we think that it's like something land barons do. We think that it's something that you only do if you have a lot of wealth or resources or when you're older. And so trying to take it like 5 minutes at a time or kind of eating the elephant off your chest one bite at a time makes it easier to kind of get and keep your shit together, right? So for those people who can take a whole day off and sit on the 70th floor of some attorney's office with like the views and the mahogany desk, like, good for you. That's amazing. And we should all use whatever resources we have. However, we all have something, and writing down a password downloading and using a password manager, updating your beneficiary online for all of your accounts. That can literally take 5 minutes. And so it's easier, I think, especially for me, non-neurotypical person, to take those things kind of like one bite or 5 minutes at a time, so it doesn't feel so daunting and overwhelming,
Yeah.
and frankly, easy to continue to procrastinate.
Is that why you think a lot of people find themselves in this situation? Is that it's simply, I'll worry about that later?
I think so. I mean, a lot of people, so after my late husband died, we had our wills drafted. They were sitting in my inbox. They had been sitting there for probably a handful of months, and they were unsigned. So that made them not technically worth the paper they weren't yet printed on. But what was helpful is that we'd had a conversation and I knew some of the things, right? Can you ask me the question again?
Oh, just basically this concept of planning ahead. Is it what prevents people from doing this work?
Yeah, that's such a good question. So I found myself in good company in the sense that over half of US adults don't have their wills done, and even fewer have their advanced care directive, which is like your end of life wishes. And procrastination is one of them. I think we don't really understand that it's easier than we think. I don't think that there's ever like the high school home ec class or the, talking about death and estate planning isn't very sexy. So it's either triggers or milestones. Those, I think, are the opportunities, to use a big, not correct word. But oh shit, I really need to get my shit together when you realize that you have half the passwords, but you don't know where the other stuff is.
Yeah.
So avoidance.
I'm lucky if I can remember my own password.
Oh, exactly. Right. So when my late husband died, he and I split a lot of the responsibilities. So we had a pretty good distribution of labor, and it wasn't necessarily kind of like dialed in by traditional gender approaches, which I appreciated a lot. What we didn't do that well was share the information with the other person. And so that was a thing that was definitely a lessons learned. So now we've got password managers that are much more popular. There's a number of different ways that we're trying to be safe and secure when it comes to our data and our information, because there's breaches and who knows what kind of craziness all the time. And then also just know where our stuff is. So how detailed we're going to be is up to you. How like secure and, in some super safe online lock where you need to like, cryo freeze your head to be able to get access to it, who knows? But there is definitely a balance between what if something happened, and an exercise to do this, I think, to help kind of get past that, I don't even know where to start, there's so many things, is I like to have like a what if exercise. So it's, what if something happened? What would I want or need to make the first 24 or 48 hours better? And so for a number of years, as a solo parent, my parents lived in another state. My dad was managing an illness. And so if something happened and I got the phone call and I needed to go visit him, then I knew what I needed. So I needed somebody to be able to come pick up my kid from school or work or home and stay with him for a few days. I needed to be able to buy a plane ticket to get there. I needed a pet sitter who could come and make sure that the dog didn't eat the couch again. So there was a quick list of things that were really helpful for me to know that if something happened, these are the things that I would want. And that makes it a little less scary than to think about yourself being dead and everybody like crying appropriately at your funeral or your celebration of life. And then that becomes, for me, super overwhelming. So what would I need if or when kind of the shit went down? And you can start with 5 things. There's another, if the what if game doesn't entice you, which I'm like, let's play the what if game. Everyone's like, no, thank you. I'm going to go to the bathroom and never come back. There's also the aliens scenario, which I like to play.
Scenario.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Tell me
like a little bit of a sci-fi nerd. However, if the alien ships were coming down and about to sit over your city, but you knew you had an hour, right? Not 5 minutes to run around like and grabbing a can of tuna and underwear, right? And not like a week, so you'd be like, cool, I'll get to it tomorrow. I'm just going to watch Golden Girls or whatever. If you had an hour, what would you grab out of your house, or what would you want or need that was important to you?
Mm.
And that's kind of a little easier to play the alien game, I like. Because one of the things that I've noticed is I get calls and emails from people all over the country, particularly when we have our aging parents and our large aging population. Like, how do we navigate getting our own shit together, much less how do we have a conversation with our parents? Often the conversation first starts with, well, I don't know if mom and or dad or moms or dads are going to be able to live independently. So what do I do with all this stuff in the garage? Mm-hmm. Or the like National Geographics up in the attic or whatever. And I was like, let's not start with the detritus and the shit we don't care about. Let's start with the stuff that's actually important. Like, what would make your mom or dad or parent or partner happy, that you would know, so you can advocate on their behalf, and you know where the Bitcoin is.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting. I mean, the example you give, I think about my father's house and the coffee cans full of nails. Like, there's a lot of those. That's not going to be a priority, probably.
Probably not. You can leave your nails and go first through like the albums or your accounts. Exactly. Or does someone have power of attorney? So if something happens, we can help pay your rent, or talk to doctors, or navigate a different living situation. But you know what? How often do you think about the nails? A lot, probably.
Clearly more than I should.
It's easy to think about the nails. It's harder to think about the power of attorney document.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. So I can see how, doing work like this, when you're thinking about the people that you love, the people that you really care about, you're thinking about your partner, your parents, folks that you may end up taking care of if something happens. What about for yourself? What do you do preemptively to help all of those people should something happen to you?
Yeah, that is a great question, and kind of where the rubber hits the road, meets the road. I'm not sure which one it is. So for me, I think about like, what would be the biggest headache for people to have to deal with, and what would be the stuff that they would want right away. So it's kind of like reverse engineering the what if plan on behalf of your parents. So for me, I have two adult children in my life, young adult children. And one of the things that I don't want for my young adult son is to be the one to have to field all of these questions. Mm-hmm. Like, should we do we turn the machines off on your mom? And my 21, 22-year-old is going to not enjoy that question, nor do I want him to answer it. So I think about what's going to make it easier for other people. I have a box with all the stuff in it, and I send out a what I think is very enjoyable and adorable annual newsletter. Normally you'll get there's a great
holiday card,
card, the great tradition of who's doing what and where. I'm like, guess where the wills are. They're still in the same place they were last year. Here's the password manager. So it's a great way for me to feel like I'm doing damage control as much as possible. So the people in my life aren't going to have to spend the 200 to 300 hours on average to go through probate.
Right.
So one of the things I realized was that no matter how great you are about planning in advance, it's still a hard process to navigate all of that admin. So you can have your wills done, your power of attorney, you can take those hundreds of hours down to a few dozen hours, which is literally like one of the most amazing things, the biggest gifts you can give to anybody. But still navigating the court process, or even just figuring out a couple days, weeks, or even months after somebody dies, what do I do and how do I be an executor of an estate? What are letters of administration? So after a number of years of helping people through the planning process, which is so critical, just to get as much out of the way so you have more space in your life. You're not worrying and thinking about this every night. Your child on Mother's Day goes, yeah, Mom, I totally know. You have life insurance and blah, 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 blah. So like I've done the pre-work, and yet it still really sucks to have to navigate all of the after stuff, particularly if you've never heard of the word probate and you don't know what that is. So a couple of years ago, I met another founder of a company. He had started something called Easy Probate because he and I had a similar experience where you're like dealing with the after. He was coming at this from a financial and the probate, the after side. I had been really coming from this from the how do we make it easier and how do we take care of all the stuff that I wish I would have done. But I realized that no matter how much planning you do in advance, which is super important, having some help and support to navigate that process afterwards is really important, which is why I'm working with a new company and we're helping people with probate. And so
what does that look like, helping people with probate?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So a lot of people in the end of life industry or end of life care are not that familiar with it either. So unless it's kind of like quicksand, unless you've been stuck in it, you really don't know what to look for or what it is. So probate is kind of a legal and administrative quicksand in a way. So after somebody dies, everything that that person owns is either beneficiaried or there's a transfer on death or payable on death, plans made in advance, or it's part of their estate. So the estate of, and then there's a legal process that's required by law, by your state, to appropriately make sure that the heirs get the estate assets, right? So the wife or the children or the second cousin twice removed because nobody else is an heir that you can find. And so it's not optional. You have to go through it. And so when you're already navigating a big change in your life, I can absolutely tell you that having to go to a court hearing or having to figure out how to even just fill out the paperwork, which is archaic and uses just language that nobody's familiar with, right? Like it's like trying to maybe like do a recipe that's all in French and you don't speak any French. So you're like, I kind of maybe understand that there's a souffle that needs to get made, but I have no idea what you're talking about. So it's very disorienting, and nobody really enjoys going to court as far as I understand it, or the legal process, particularly when you have no experience with what that is, and hiring an attorney to walk you through the process or to pay an attorney to manage it for you is a financial option that very few people actually have or can afford.
So when you look back on your experience and everything that you were going through at that time, you know, when you're talking about the estate planning, the probate, all of the work that you did, what was the biggest challenge for you as you're dealing with, you know, your kids and your grief and your incredibly difficult, you know, personal experiences? What were you struggling the most with logistically?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I mean, I think at first it was the fear and confusion about what I'm even supposed to do, right? Like, where is everything? And it's just this big unknown, right? You have to walk into this room and you don't want to. So it was getting past the kind of fear and uncertainty and procrastination of even knowing what to do. Thankfully, I had friends who were not estate attorneys, but they were attorney adjacent and or familiar with contract language. So I had the benefit of having people who could navigate that world, who I trusted, two important things, to advocate on my behalf. The other thing was the financial part of it. So to have an attorney, like to retain an attorney, often you have to pay them in advance to just get started. Frequently, that's a $5,000 retainer advancement that you pay. so they can just start working. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be $5,000. It could be a lot more. And so the financial burden, for me, I was lucky that we had some life insurance, not as much as we should have had, but it was really helpful. Like the bridge from the old life to the new one could have been longer, but it had a bridge which was life-saving. But that was challenging to think about paying somebody to, a few $1,000s or more. But at that point, I was able to, and I was really grateful that in my case, the state that we live in and we were legally married, made the process much easier. If you have a blended family or somebody like a sister who, stole your sweater in high school and you don't talk anymore, and now there's a lot of bad feelings. So after somebody dies and things aren't super clear about who gets what and what happens next, it doesn't always bring out the best in people. So it was a number of things that kind of ended up being a big swirl. And in our case, it was easier to manage, but also it still took longer than it should have. And for years, I was chasing down accounts or something. And so
for years.
Yeah, for a couple of years, wow. Like there was a 401k that I didn't know about, or some money that showed up from like a check from like a data company or a cell service. So for years, there were still these little kind of tentacles or these little details that, for what I would consider myself being an otherwise like reasonably, smart enough person who can manage details, right? Like it was really overwhelming, and somehow it was so hard to just open up another letter from another place that needed you to fill out another form, and it was going to take another 5 hours of walking through the madness when you're like, I've got a life to manage and kids and all of that stuff. So it's really challenging to be thrown into somebody else's crazy maze of a financial and legal world, and you just have to do it because there's no other option.
Yeah, things that you might not have even ever talked about with him that resurface.
Yeah, there were a number of things. It's interesting because we talked about what our what we would want at the end, right? Like what's quality of life for you? What would be acceptable? What's not acceptable? So in our case, his injuries were so significant that the decision was nearly made for me. We didn't talk a lot about like a funeral or, I knew he wanted to be cremated, but, now there's other options. You can be composted. There's lots of other things. And we hadn't, had we not had a conversation after new things would happen, maybe I would have done the wrong thing. And you can't uncremate someone.
This is true.
So there were some things that I didn't know at all. We didn't talk about funerals. We didn't talk about, if you're not around, and I'm raising our kids by ourselves, how do you feel about eating dessert first? Or how do you feel about, some of these other things? So you're never going to get all the details, but that's why I think if the aliens landed in an hour, what would you want to keep? What would you want to say? What would you want to grab? What would you want to find? Knowing those important things can be, at the very least, like guideposts along the way. So you have some idea of what's most important, and you have, like mile markers along the way. So you can maybe know if you've gone too far.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned, passwords, and that feels like as soon as you say that, I think, I don't even know how I would start, but that's a big one. Social Security number is another one that you mentioned. Are there some other, like, just kind of collect the information and put it in one place stuff that you recommend?
I do. So that's kind of the 5 minutes at a time thing. Yeah. When a statement comes in from your insurance or you're updating your medical files. So The what happens if something happens, who do you want to call, what's their phone number, what are your basic policies. I have a folder in my phone where I take pictures of the important things. So while my dad was managing his illness, I had pictures of the business cards of his doctors and pictures of his prescriptions. Those are the things that I would have needed to know if someone called and said, something's happened, who are his specialists? It would take me hours to run around and try to dig that up, but I had it. So having the, what might I really need to know? And then I do have a, all good things come to an end file. So I have.
Is that what it's really called?
Yeah.
That's great.
You can call it when I die, you can call it whatever you want, but like all good things. So here's my all good things file. And in it are, I'm going to guess I'm in the 90th percentile. I'm going to give myself a gold star, but I'm also going to say it's not perfect, but it's going to reduce the amount of what, if, and where. I also have a one pager, which is, if I have an attorney, here's who it is. Here are like the 3 or 4 people who have copies of my legal documents and their phone numbers. Here's the person who's my digital power of attorney. And then in this box, you'll find most of the stuff you'll really ever need. So what are the things that I don't want to get lost? And then for a lot of people, it's like, what are the things I want 1 or 2 people to find, but not everyone? So there is a little bit of a consenting adults might have things. So having a cleaner, like for me, do I really want everyone to find the journals of terrible poetry that I wrote in high school? No, I don't. No, there are some hairstyles and some bad poetry choices I made. Not everyone needs to see that. There might also be some other things that we don't want everyone to see. So making sure things don't get lost, making sure the right person can find the things that you want to be found.
That's really interesting. And just having that in a file makes so much sense in a digital folder. You just said digital power of attorney. Talk about that.
So I do have the printouts in a container, which is like marginally fireproof and waterproof. So good enough. A little extra layer. It's more than a Ziploc baggie. And then I have copies of that information emailed or put into a password manager with a little vault with some access given to people. Now, a digital power of attorney is something that is newer, and it basically helps with the fact that digital assets are still a little bit like the Wild West out there, right? Like, who owns your IP? Who owns your songs? Who owns your photographs that are online? Who owns the ability for you to even log into Facebook or whatever it is? So some companies are getting better about being able to name somebody as your digital beneficiary or your legacy contact. But for the most part, it has been really awful and traumatizing, and in some cases nearly impossible to get access to people's digital accounts, digital files, digital assets. And so the thing you can add to your power of attorney document is giving somebody the, specifying in advance, I give this person digital power of attorney so they can access all of my digital accounts and my digital assets, which in some cases is a great proactive tool. And in other cases is at least a good defense if you come up against issues with somebody not granting you access.
So this is an actually legally binding document that says I have granted this person.
Exactly. So you can have a separate digital power of attorney, or kind of the 3 core foundational legal documents in estate planning is your will, which is who gets your stuff after you die, your advance care directive, which is your end of life wishes, and a power of attorney doc, which kind of bridges the in between, right? So if or when you are recovering from an illness, or during COVID, we saw this a lot when people were intubated, somebody would be able to talk with the doctors, pay for things, access files. It's just important. The digital power of attorney is something you can add to your power of attorney, who might have executive power of attorney or different levels of, you can give a few different people access to different roles, or you can have one person manage everything. But adding a digital power of attorney and specifying that has been really helpful, and attorneys are highly recommending that we have that in our documents moving forward.
I'd like to maybe switch gears just a tad and talk a little bit about the entrepreneurial journey. You know, you started a company based on the most horrible moment of your life. You have to kind of continually relive that. You're doing that with us today, but it also is a really powerful why behind why you started the company. You've been at it for a while now. Talk about that journey and how that has been for you, both, maybe some logistically, but also emotionally.
Yeah, so it is not uncomplicated to start a company based on the worst moment ever. It was this kind of moment that lightning bolted into my head when I was in the hospital, and when I really had that, oh my God, I need to get my shit together moment. It was something I couldn't put down. And trust me, I've tried a few times, but it keeps coming back. So as somebody who has worked in creative industry and as a project manager and nonprofits, running nonprofits, it kind of made sense. Well, I think it was Larry Brilliant, if you know Larry Brilliant. Mm-hmm. He said something close to, my life makes sense if you look at it backwards. And I remembered that quote. And it makes sense to me that at that moment, standing there in the ICU, knowing that whatever life I had, whether he was going to be able to recover or not, was over, and what was going to happen next. And the person, the way my brain works is I'm a big systems thinker. I want to ask why and how come, and I want to change things. And I like to create stuff that doesn't exist in the world and show it to people. So it took about 2 or 2.5 years. And what started off for me as a 10-page little website, which was, here's what happened, here's what I learned, and here's what you can do. Very simple, full of adorable typos. Was a personal project in a lot of ways. And I had, I think, 2 perhaps oppositional or complementary points of view about what I was putting out into the world. It was important to me to do this to help all of the people who showed up for me. It felt like an energetic return. And my kind of ability to think very big picture and see stars out in the world and make constellations out of them. I was like, you know what? This is kind of like mint.com meets Priceline. And what if it was open source? Which makes absolutely no sense at all. I understand that. But the other question is, if this resonates with me and a lot of my friends and anyone I talk to, what if this resonates with more people? What if it's not my story? What if it's everybody's story? What if my example, I could be anybody's wife or sister or daughter or mother or auntie or friend or colleague. And so when I first put this teeny little adorable website out in the world, it was some basic information. I shared my legal documents. I was like, here's a checklist I wrote because I need everything in 1 or 2 pages I can see. I need kitchen table instructions. I don't need TurboTax for my life. I need something that's really easy. If you think of the Checklist Manifesto, which was a great book about getting down to the important things. So I put this website out in the world, and I remember it was right after winter break. My son was going back to school, and I think I hit publish on a Monday night, and Tuesday morning, the New York Times called. Right, super weird. I was like, it has made everything that I've launched after that kind of disappointing.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think that's the usual entrepreneurial journey.
Right. Definitely not. But it turns out that I published this thing, hey, everyone, on Facebook. Here's this thing I made, and I hope it helps you. And and here's what I learned. And it got shared and shared and shared and shared so many times that it made it all the way across the coast from Seattle to New York. And the Ron Lieber from the New York Times called in the morning, woke me up early, which I was mad at him about. I was like, dude, it is 6 a.m. Who is calling from the East Coast? What's happening? And it turns out that it isn't just my story, it's everyone's story. We've all been there. We're going through it as a caregiver, or we will soon. And it is a hard conversation to have, but it's one that we're all kind of dying to have.
So you felt like you just kind of struck a nerve, and that was the moment that you knew this needed to be a company.
Yeah. And so on the business side of things, the MVP worked, right? The product market fit worked, if we want to talk businessy stuff. The thing that I didn't put together in advance was any sort of business plan.
Well, it doesn't sound like you were necessarily even thinking this was a business at the time.
No, I wasn't. And so there were a number of different options for me at that point. One was get investor money. One was become like an affiliate referral site. Another one was like become, make it about me and go talk to people, be Suze Orman or something. If I'm saying that right, Susie, I think it's Suze. And the thing that was important to me was that it struck a nerve. And the question when it comes to running a business, especially one based on your personal life, is when you make your business and your paycheck about your personal life, there is a level of complication that I felt 2.5 years after my late husband died, walking into as something that there had been enough time. I'd done a ton of therapy. Like I was yogaing the shit out of everything. Like I was really feeling like I was like nailing grief and loss, and I did a really good job. Turns out that grief and loss is cyclical. And so every now and then I didn't want to talk about my dead husband. I didn't want to do the things that, so as a business owner, as somebody who is going into an entrepreneurial phase, there was, I'll be honest, definitely some internal conflict about how much is giving too much of me away. How long do I want to drag my dead husband around in my life? How do I additionally continue to do this work that is important, that I'm dedicated to, I feel incredibly strongly about. So what's enough and what's too much? And so I've tried a different versions of it. The first few years, get your shit together, was B Corp, my own company. I did not take any additional money from people. A few years into that, I realized that if I really wanted to scale and reach all of the people who needed this, I needed to maybe like not do it all by myself. So I started a second company called GYST.com with a couple of Seattle local folks who were interested in the aging in place space, and then also had a track record of running companies. And I didn't have a lot of that. I knew my story better than anyone, and I knew how to make things and get them out in the world, but I did not have a lot of experience fundraising. So GYST.com was the second iteration of that. We were really successful in a lot of ways. We reached more people. The company was acquired by another large end-of-life platform called Cake, which was acquired also by another company after that. And so right around in that like 2018 to 2020 phase, I had been thinking, cool, I started a startup, it got acquired. I can now like write a book or have a quieter life. I wrote a book, and then things got quiet in a way that nobody anticipated, because right after my book came out and I was about to go do all of this outreach and speaking at conferences, the pandemic happened, and everything got real quiet for a lot of people real fast.
Although these topics got all the more important,
Definitely,
kind of in that moment too.
Yeah, right. So end of life, caregiving, what if scenarios, what happens when something happens, all of that became front and center at a time where we couldn't really be around each other. So it was a otherworldly in a lot of ways time. And so instead of getting out into the world and talking with people at conferences all around the country, I spent a lot of time Zooming with different people and starting online classes, which was really wonderful in a way to have a Get Your Shit Together online course and workshop. And there were, a couple in their 80s from rural Maine to some like hipsters in Park Slope to folks in Texas and all over the country. And so we really learned from each other in a lot of ways. And it was during that time, kind of the third iteration of Get Your Shit Together is working with somebody else, working with Scrivner to make this 360 solution easier for everyone. So I continue to do talks and workshops and teach online about planning. And I'm really excited to be working with Scrivner, doing marketing and outreach and really thinking about how do we help people through the whole process. It really feels to me like this 360 complete circle. So on a company level and on a management level and entrepreneurial level, I've gone through probably 3 real distinct phases. The first one is running a company all by myself, which was satisfying in 100 ways. I'm a great boss, perhaps too lenient sometimes. But then realizing that I wanted to scale, taking investment money and sharing management. And, my goal with that was really thinking about really wanting to invite other people who disagreed with me to bring their perspective to how to make this bigger and better. Turns out that's not always fun when they're disagreeing with you, but it made what we were doing better and stronger, and more people found us. And then this third version is continuing to Get Your Shit Together on a selective basis, right? Where I will do the talks and workshops, I will do the writing, and to be 1,000% honest, working for somebody else in a way where they are making some of the big decisions and I get to add strategic guidance. It has been really great in a lot of ways, I'm not going to lie. So all 3 have their benefits, and maybe there's a chapter 4 somewhere, but for now I'm really enjoying this.
Well, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
So sort of final question here, Chanel, you've talked a lot about this company, the building, the emotions that you went through. You're now 12 years into this. Your kids are a little older. They're out of the house. What's giving you joy right now? What's making you happy? Where do you kind of go to? Are you still yogaing the shit out of everything? Or like, what's your happy place?
Oh, I love that. I'm spending more time in the garden. And I have my father's genetics in a lot of ways. And apparently nurturing the perfect heirloom tomato is apparently this psychotic gift thing that I've gotten through his genetics. So I really love that. I love being outside. And I think for a number of years, being a solo parent, having a community of people, my life was, like many parents, pretty much controlled by or architected around kids' school schedules, daycare schedules, when's like spring break this year, when's summer break, and how am I going to get childcare? And so now they are adults, young adults still, so parenting is never over. But now I like the idea of newness. I like the idea of having a little more spontaneity, and I like the idea of integrating everything I love about being in Seattle. And in this, like middle-aged time, like how do I rock this in a way that's fun, where there's still adventure and there's still learning new things. And that could be like mastering how do I grow the best heirloom tomato ever, to maybe I should learn how to spearfish.
Oh my gosh. That's two very different things. But maybe you should. That sounds amazing.
Who knows, right? That's the Gemini extrovert for you. So I need both.
I love that. I love that you're already planning your next adventure too. That's great.
One thing that I think it was my therapist or somebody had said to me when I was like, am I depressed? Are you sure I'm not depressed? My husband just died. My life is, am I depressed? They're like, okay, Chanel, what are you doing for the holidays? And I was like, well, we're going to go do this. And then I want to do this. And then I want to take my kid ice skating because I grew up ice skating and he doesn't know how to ice skate. And so she said, depressed people generally don't make exciting plans for the future. So my mantra has been, no matter what it is, right? Like it's a walk, it's a polar plunge on New Year's, it's whatever it is, but making exciting plans for the future is where I find my joy.
I love that. Well, Chanel, thank you so much for sharing everything today and for all the work that you're doing. And thanks for sitting down with me.
Thank you so much. It's been so fun to talk to you.